Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about movies, music, art, and culture. Today we're going to be talking about the debut album from YG, titled My Krazy Life. I was going to skip this album. And honestly, on first look, could you have blamed me? I've said a number of times in the past that the current crop of gangster rappers, they've rarely interested me if they don't do something fresh with the formula. And YG looked like the poster child of not only cementing himself to that formula, but doing it worse than everyone else combined. Frankly, I was shocked to see him with a new album, let alone a debut album at all. For a rapper who built the first steps of his career off of the oh-so-classy track Toot It and Boot It, I thought we had just consigned him to the same memory hole in which we dumped Chingy, Mims, and Soulja Boy. But then again, I thought to myself, Mark, get your head out of your ass. Just because it's superficial and dumb party bangers doesn't mean they have to be bad, and it's not like all the material in this genre is stuff that you dislike. And to a point, that's true. I admit I've got a soft spot for certain brands of dumb gangster rap, particularly in the crunk vein that was popular in the early to mid 2000s. But I guess some of my unironic liking for acts like Ludacris and especially Lil Jon comes from the fact that what they didn't have in intelligence, they made up for in explosive, high-energy beats, or solid technical rapping, or even just an ability just to go over the top with a populist vibe that can suck you in. Call it the Andrew WK methodology, if you will. And yet, with YG, his main collaborating producer is DJ Mustard, a producer who already picked up a bad reputation in and around hip-hop circles for making sterile, lifeless, very simplistic beats that just aren't all that interesting. So, in other words, the only reason why I'm covering this album at all is because of suddenly critical outlets that I normally respect started throwing scores that seemed suspiciously high at this album. So, you know what? I assume maybe I was presumptuous. Maybe I was missing something. And to give YG some credit, he did say he was drawing more inspiration from the 90s G-Funk scene, most of which I do like, so I gave this album a couple more listens. How was it? Well, it wasn't as bad as I was expecting, and I get why some critics really do like this album. But to me, there's just not enough new or interesting flavor here to really grip me, even by gangster rap standards. On top of that, while I get what YG was trying to do with this album, I don't think he stuck the landing. All this adds up to an album that isn't exactly bad, but is pretty far from great or any sort of critical acclaim, at least by my books. So, okay, let's start with YG himself, and I'll be straight with you here. I don't think he's a great rapper. Sure, he occasionally has some good flows on occasion, but too often his delivery just doesn't have the same intensity or flavor, and it really shows on I Just Wanna Party, the collaborating track with Schoolboy Q and J-Rock. Neither of which are at their best on this song, but they stick out more than YG does behind the microphone. On top of that, on a technical level, YG isn't exactly witty, and he can get pretty lazy with his punchlines, more often resorting to just rhyming words with themselves and repeating rhymes that I've heard multiple times throughout the course of this album. It's very telling that when Drake and Kendrick Lamar show up on this album for some reason with their songs and deliver verses with some actual subtext, and they sound like they're from a completely different universe than YG. And then we've got the lyrical content. And you know what? At this point, I'd have a hard time calling these violent fantasies or even vaguely justifiable just thug activities. They're just hustling to survive. There are tracks on this album where it would be hard not to make the argument that they actively endorse gang activity, especially throwing down for blood affiliation, especially on Bickin' Back Bein' Bool. Yes, that's a track title. On this album, we're treated to step-by-step home invasions, gangbangs, and shootouts, and as much as YG shouts out rest in peace at the end of his Drake collaboration Who Do You Love, where it really does feel out of place and only kind of works with the next track in the sequence, on this album, nobody dies. He tries to add some weight of greater consequences on the last three tracks where he gets arrested and tries to play it off saying that he doesn't have to hustle anymore thanks to rap and that he was just doing this all for his family and to support his mother. But here's where it doesn't quite work, because we never get the introspective moments anywhere else on this album. It comes across as weak excuses attempting to rationalize the previous songs on the record, and it's not remotely convincing. Furthermore, it's hard to take this sudden moment of conscience remotely seriously when his biggest hits come from this brand of gangster rap. And I don't buy for a second that he's going to stop making that kind of material. His collaborator Jeezy, he's been doing this sort of thing for years. So why on earth should I believe that YG is just going to stop talking about the hustle and grind? And the worst part of all this is that YG is such a limited rapper in terms of his description that his gang activity doesn't really come across as all that interesting or thrilling. He seems to be a little bit more descriptive when it comes to his sex jams, none of which I think work effectively because nobody in his songs, be it he or his partners, come across as remotely sympathetic, especially in the pair of songs Do It To Ya and Me and My Bitch, where everyone is cheating on each other, and yet we're supposed to buy into YG's emotional plight. We're supposed to buy into the reason why he doesn't trust women anymore? No. The closest where it works is on the Party Jam Left Right. On top of that, because he's supported by one of the sleaziest string lines I've ever heard, and the synth, it does have some impact. But even still, he talks about sex like he should beat it like OJ. Classy. And speaking of the instrumentation and production, this is where I fear the album suffers the most. Maybe it's because in terms of club bangers or gangsta traps, the beats that YG has are just so incredibly unconvincing and minimalist, often with a watery synth line, gang vocals, and a beat courtesy of DJ Mustard that they just don't work for me. Now let me make this clear. I'm not going to say that DJ Mustard is an outright terrible producer. I'm just gonna say he's limited. On the right slick club bangers, he's a pretty good fit. And his work with Kid Ink on Rollin' earlier this year, it was a really good fit. I really like that song. But YG's brand of harder street music seems to demand more texture and grime in the Schoolboy Q sort of vein in the instrumentation, or at least greater bombast. And DJ Mustard just doesn't deliver that. On top of that, his melody lines are all really similar to each other, mostly because they consist of the very same 3 or 4 notes in a minor chord, albeit with a different keyboard setting to slightly mix up. He goes up, then he goes down. It's also basic and rudimentary that when paired with YG's not particularly complex flows, you get a record that really doesn't turn out to be all that interesting or all that special. And it doesn't have the flair or power or epic bombast to make that sort of simplicity compelling. Want more proof? Whenever the instrumentation does get some texture or flair or goes beyond just a 4-note melody line, it's either sampled or it's from a different producer entirely, all of which I find to be a better fit for YG, or at least give him something more of a unique individual flavor. Look, at this point, I get YG's appeal. He's a very, very basic gangster rapper with beats clean enough to cross over to pop radio, and he's not remotely threatening, at least to me. So, okay, he's catering to the lowest common denominator, and he's just edgy enough with the gang and the sex references to appear to have more personality than he really does. And you know what? I'll admit that there are a few points where it kind of works. But his wordplay is sloppy, his instrumentation is incredibly weak, his material in terms of his lyrics is recycled and unconvincing, and his one good punchline came on Really Be Smoking and Drinking, and then Kendrick blows him out of the water. I'm not gonna call this record bad or offensive, as you can tell that there was some effort here, but it's not good either, and it gets a 5 out of 10 for me. YG might have found some brand of potency and just raw simplicity, but he's not a polished or interesting enough rapper to make it all that special or remotely compelling for me. And Jeezy, is this the guy who you really want to throw your name behind? Really? Okay, you can stick by YG. I'm gonna stick with Freddie Gibbs. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If you can't tell who's the next rapper that I'm gonna be covering on this show, well, I dropped in the tail end. You'll figure it out. So if there's any other albums that you'd like me to take a look at, or if there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'd be more than happy to hear it. So until then, I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.